Don Dokken. More info at fullandbloom.com. How are your hands doing?
Well, I go to therapy twice a week. My right hand, I wish I had better news, but it's been over 7 months, but I've only gotten about 2 or 3% back of movement. I keep going to therapy, but I don't know. They said it could take a year and a half, or never. So I'm on my 7th month. And a year and 4 months, 5 months from now, if I haven't seen a lot of progress, it'll just be the way it is the rest of my life. So I won't be playing guitar anymore. I played guitar for 50 years. I got to look at it that way. I'll go on tour and sing.
I saw somewhere where you were saying you had to become left-handed. Is your left hand completely better?
It works. I have all my dexterity in the fingers, so it's just weak. So I'm lifting light weights, 5-pounders and light weights. I just lift and lift and lift and lift. But the hard part is the brain. I still have habits of reaching for the car door with my right hand, and I can't open it. And I reach for a fork, I eat and I drop it. It's just your brain. I'm not a lefty, so I've had to learn to do all kinds of things with my left hand. So it is what it is. I don't know why it happened. It shouldn't have happened. And I had the surgery and got the best people supposedly, and I drew a short straw. So I'm not happy about it. I'm pissed. Many people have this surgery on their spine, and they don't wake up with their right side paralyzed. But I guess I should look at the positive side. When I first came out, I couldn't walk. I could barely stand up for more than a couple of minutes. I was in a walker, and then I was on a cane. And the first 4 or 5 months was pretty rough going. But now I'm back to hiking. We have 4 big dogs. Got 3 German shepherds and a huge golden doodle. And so every day I just get out on our property of our 13 acres, and I go and I follow the deer trails and just try to build up my body strength so I can survive touring.
I know you had neck and spinal surgery, but was something fused together, or is that just from years of pain, or why did you have the surgery initially?
I didn't have any pain at all. I still don't. Just some weird shit was happening. It started out kind of like I was riding my Harley, and it seemed like it was getting harder and harder to pull the clutch in. I actually thought there was something wrong with my clutch cable, because it was like I'm really pulling hard on it. And then funny things like I was playing guitar, and it just seemed like the strings were getting harder and harder to push down, and my right hand harder to hold the pick, and just little things like that for like a couple years. So I finally went to a doctor, and he checked my hands, and they said, "Oh, you got carpal tunnel. No big deal. We can fix that." A lot of guitar players get it. But they wanted to do an MRI. And they did an MRI on my neck and my whole back, and the guy said, "I hate to tell you this, but 5, 6, and 7 at the base of your spine, your spinal cord is completely compressed, and you're losing blood flow, and it's cut off." And I said, "Well, what do I do?" And they said, "Well, you can let it go, but eventually you will lose the use of your hands, and the nerves will die, and you need to fix it now to get back what nerves you have left." And I said, "Okay." And nobody knows. They said, "Were you in a car accident?" No. "Did you get rear-ended?" No. "Did you have a motorcycle accident?" No. I studied martial arts for 25 years, and I got kicked around a bit, took some hard falls, but nobody really knows what happened. It could be just age. It wasn't like arthritis or... I saw the MRI. I'm not a doctor. I could see it. My whole spinal cord was just swooshed.
The physical therapy, that entails just lifting weights. Is there anything else that they do?
No, on the right hand, I can't lift the weight at all. My right hand's still paralyzed completely. My triceps, biceps, forceps, all the muscles in my right arm are just gone 100%. Like I had a stroke, kind of like. I'm just concentrating on my left hand, build it up as strong as I can, get my fingers back as strong as I can so I can play guitar again. But I don't know how I'm going to hold a pick, but there's other things, options I can do. They can take tendons and move them around and reconnect them to my thumb. And it's amazing. You don't realize how important your thumb is till you don't have it. You need your thumb to hold things. You need your thumb to pick up things, and my thumb doesn't budge. So it's a bitch. But what can I do? It's reality, and I'm trying to stay positive, and it's depressing sometimes when you can't. I just want to go out in the yard and work and trim trees like I did last year, and get out my chainsaw and trim some branches and rake the yards. And when you got 13 acres of land, that's a lot of upkeep. I was out there every day cutting. I have thousands and thousands of trees surrounding me, and some die. They just die. They get infected and they get beetle bark. So you got to go out there and cut them down and chop them up. And I can't do any of that now. I just can't. I can't do anything. But I'm getting better. For 6 months, I couldn't put my clothes on. No, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it with one hand. I couldn't put my socks on. Couldn't button my shirt. I still can't. I have to have my road manager come in and help me get dressed. I've done about 4 shows since surgery, and we did some Lynch mob shows in Dokken. And yeah, I have to have somebody come on the road and basically look after me. I can't carry my suitcase. It's hard to put the seatbelt on the plane. Little things you take for granted. grounded. I can't button my shirt. I can't zip up my boots. Little things like that. So I have somebody on the road now basically babysitting me.
Before all this, how often did you play guitar? Did you have like a routine?
No routine, but I did play every day. There was always people seeing that, George Lynch wrote all the songs and I wrote the lyrics, but that wasn't the case. I wrote a lot of the music. I wrote In My Dreams and Into the Fire and Alone Again. And I wrote those just me and my guitar sitting in my apartment and my little cheap little 4-track TAC recorder. But I've been playing guitar since I was 10 years old. There's always a guitar in the living room, the bedroom, all over the house. They're scattered and there's no routine. I just pick it up when I feel like picking it up. I can be watching TV and all of a sudden it's an odd thing. It just comes to your head. And all of a sudden I hear a melody or I hear a guitar riff or I hear a lyric and I go, oh, wait a minute, that's pretty cool. And I'll grab my guitar and I have this little tiny digital tape recorder that's like literally in my pocket 24/7. And I'll just turn the tape recorder on and I'll put it down.
I was watching an old video. It looked like the Breaking the Chains lineup with Juan, and it was like a live thing, but you guys were playing Paris is Burning, and there's a part in there where you ripped the shit out of a solo.
Yeah, that was the Beat Club in Hamburg.
That was incredible. I had no idea you could lay it down like that.
Yeah, I used to be able to lay it down pretty good. Even our first American tour, it was George and I playing guitar together.
Yeah, I guess I just always thought you were playing rhythm guitar. I just didn't know. I mean, the solo was awesome. I had to scroll it back just because I was like, wait a second, was that fucking Don?
This new record coming out, all the guitar work was done by me in the early 70s. And most of the solos were done by me.
You got a very cool Dokken release called The Lost Songs 1978 to 1981. It features previously unreleased tracks from your very early music career. Were you always planning to release those songs at some point?
No, they were gone. I lost them. When I said the lost songs, they were lost. I didn't know they existed until like 7 months ago. I found them in my garage. I was cleaning out my garage, and I bought a 64 Stingray Corvette convertible, and I couldn't leave it outside, but it wouldn't fit in the garage with my other car. So I'm like, I can't leave this car out. All the birds are shitting on it. I thought, well, we're not on tour. COVID hitting. I was getting ready to go into surgery in a couple of weeks, so I decided I better get in the garage and start cleaning all this crap out. And so I just got a truck and a couple of guys and just went through every box. Keep this, throw it away. Keep this, throw it away. I ended up throwing like 90% of the stuff away. It was just stuff to collect in your lifetime like a pack rat. So I just threw it all away, and then I got toward the end. We were trying to organize everything to make room for the car, and I just found this big plastic tub, and I opened it up. It was really heavy, and I opened it up, and I saw these 2-inch reels of tape. What am I doing with reels of tape? I haven't recorded on tape in 25 years. And I took them out, and I opened them up, and there was track sheets in there, and I see Michael Wagner's name written on it as engineer, and it says 1979, Tennessee Ton Studios, Hamburg. I'm like, what is this stuff? I remember I'd done demos back in the day when I was on my first tour in Germany in 79 with Juan Crucier and me, and we were a 3-piece. I played all the solos, rhythms, and lead singer, and we were like a 3-piece, and I remember we used to go and sneak into the studio at night with Michael after we'd do shows and stay up till like between 3 and 7 in the morning and just record music and ideas and demos. I had no record deal. I had nothing, we were just doing it for fun. And so those songs, though, we left Germany and the tapes disappeared, and I don't know. And so I just started doing a hunt. We recorded demos in America, and we did Down at Redondo Beach, and I had put out a record in 78, like a 45 single. I didn't have a copy of that. That disappeared, and I finally hunted one of those down after a long search. A lot of them were just completely done, and some had, a solo missing or a bass line was distorted. And so I just fixed the songs the best I could. Some of the songs had a drum machine on them. It sounded like ass. And I had my drummer, BJ Zappa, put real drums on the songs, make them sound better. And I was just doing it for fun because I had nothing else to do. And we were working on a new studio album, and I just talked to my record company, and Silver Line said, man, that'd be a cool thing to put out for nostalgia to show people your early days, years before current Dokken lineup of the classic one of Lynch, Brown, and Pilsen. I said, all right, I'll put 11 songs if I can find them. And there were some tapes that had a lot of other songs too, but the tapes were so old and so rotten, they just wouldn't play. I said, what I saved, and this is all I got. There's nothing else out there that hasn't been released. So So I saved 11 songs.
I know you had a group called Airborne back then. Are some of those songs from that period?
Right about that time, you know. I mean, it was like we were called Airborne, and the reason we changed the name was a band got signed that was called Airborne.
I think Bo Hill was in that band.
Yeah, might have been Bo Hill's band. And so he put out an album called Airborne, and I went, uh-oh, we're screwed now. We got to change our name, like right now. I just said, well, we'll just call it Dokken until we can come up with a better name, because I had an unusual last name. And that's how it started. And actually, the original album, Breaking the Chains, when it came out in Germany, I had no band still. It was just me. And even though it says George and back and Jeff and all that, they were just hired musicians to play on that album. And when that album came out in Germany, they called it Don Dokken. And it just says Don Dokken, and it's a picture of me on the cover. And we sold a bunch of copies of that in Germany. And when I came back to America, a year later, things were going pretty well. And that's when I called George and Jeff and said, I might be close to getting a record deal. Do you want to make it a band? And they said yes. So I came back to LA and auditioned them and see if we can get along. And we all went back to Germany and rehearsed in like an old bomb shelter in Cologne and just started writing songs. At
that point, Juan was an official member of the band, or was he still flirting with Rat?
No, it was right before Rat. We did the tour in '79. Juan was in the band. We went back to Germany in '80, and as you see on that video, Juan was in the band, and that was like our first. That TV show was like right when we became a full band.
Like 82 or something?
It was more like 81, I think.
Okay.
And then we came back to America and couldn't get a record deal. It was only a German deal, so we still couldn't get a record deal in America. So Juan decided to leave and go with Rat.
You guys got signed to Elektra before Rat came out with Out of the Cellar, right?
Yeah, kind of right during. I think Juan's on Out of the Cellar.
Oh, yeah.
Going back and forth. That was normal in L.A. Everybody was jumping around from band to band. You know?
Oh, I know it. Yeah, I'm obsessed with that early Great White period, and I know you were heavily involved in their career, but it blew my mind that Gary Holland was in the band with you at some point.
Yeah, we did our second tour of Germany, and Gary Holland was the drummer because the other drummer was a Scientologist. I don't know much about that religion, and apparently his church told them they didn't want him going back to Germany. And I said, guys, it's only 2 weeks, Greg. And I said, what does your religion have to do with you going on the road? If you can't go on the road, you shouldn't be a drummer. And he just said they didn't want me going. And I'm like, well, I had my own thoughts on that one. So he didn't want to go. So at the last minute, I found Gary. And then after that tour, that's kind of how a year later, he was starting to play with Great White. And he asked me if I'd come out and listen to them and see if I could help them, you know. I went out, and they were rehearsing in a little garage like all bands did. And I thought Jack Russell was an amazing singer and said, I should put you guys in the studio. And Michael Wagner, I talked him into moving to America, and he was basically sleeping on my couch. I took him in the studio and did a demo and got him a record deal.
I interviewed Pete Holmes from Black and Blue.
Same story. I found Black and Blue playing at the Troubadour, And I said, you guys are really good. I should put you in the studio and do a demo and see if I can help you out. I took him in the studio. I did a demo with Black and Blue and produced him. I took him to Geffen Records. I had a friend there, John Kalodner, a famous A&R man.
Of course.
And he was a friend of mine, and he gave me a record deal. And then I was supposed to do the record, produce it and all that. But then Dokken was starting to take off, and then I couldn't do it. That's why I turned him on to Dieter Dirks, because I had recorded in Germany, at his studio and did Breaking the Chains. And I said, let me send this to Germany, and maybe he can produce you. And that's why Dieter Dirks produced the album.
Incredible. Is it just because you were very business-minded? I mean, your career hadn't totally launched at that point, yet you're very crucial in launching their careers.
No, it wasn't a financial thing. I mean, yeah, I know a lot of producers, they discover you and you get a record deal, they take a piece of the pie. But I never did that with Great White or Black and Blue. We had a contract, but all I said to those guys is, if you guys get a record deal, give me my money back for what I've spent on the demos, I didn't take any piece of the pie. I hate to sound wooey. It was more of a spiritual thing, but I was just trying to pay it forward.
Are there any memories that stand out from those out-of-the-night recording sessions?
Well, it's interesting because when you hear Out of the Night, that album was more of a hard rock record compared to what direction they took after that. They went more of that bluesy thing, But I was more like, no, I want you guys to rock, My influences were rock, and I thought that they should be a rock band, and Jack had that Robert Plant kind of voice, and that's how it went, you know. There was no financial gain. Most of these producers, they say, I want 3 points or 4 points, which means for everything I do, I get $1. So in case you make it, I'll get rich. I didn't do that with Black and Blue, and I didn't do it with Great White. I just did it because I loved being in the studio, and I kind of enjoyed being on the other side of the glass, producing and not having to play.
Did you see yourself as a producer at that point?
I don't know. I mean, I ended up producing a lot of bands in my career, over 20. I can't name them all. There was Shy and XYZ. I produced their first album. And I did a lot of records in my career producing, but it was just because I was a studio rat. I just liked being in there.
Well, I love that Great White.
Out of the night.
I know you had songwriting credits, I think, On Your Knees. And
yeah, I wrote the chorus to that. And then one of my favorite albums I did was XYZ. That was a really good album. That was out of that record I did. You know, video came out on MTV. That album did really well. But by then, we're out on the road for a year, you know, and doing world tours. So producing chops kind of took a back seat. But it kind of honed my ears to contribute to Dokken.
You also have a 7-inch single. It's Hard Rock Woman and Broken Heart. I know you were signing a bunch of those. Do you still have those available?
Nope, long gone. Sold out the first day.
Any plans to print more?
I don't know. That'd be up to the label. That was my first record I ever did. It was a 45 single. That was another record that was lost to time. It was gone because I only printed 300 copies and took them to Germany in 79, and I sold them all in Germany, and they were gone. And the producer that produced that, he saw me playing in a music store. His name was Drake Levin. He was in a famous band in the 60s called Power and the Raiders. And he just took me in the studio, and we made the record over 6 months. And same thing, I didn't have a band. So we had Rusty Allen, who was a bass player from Robin Trower, and Bill Lorden, who was a drummer in Robin Trower. And they came in and did the rhythm tracks. But that record was lost to time. Just by a stroke of luck, I was doing some interviews about making this new record. And I was talking to a guy from Sweden Rocks magazine about that record. And he says, oh, yeah, I have a copy of that. You're fucking kidding me, right? And he said, no, my brother saw you play in Berlin in 1979. He bought 2 copies, and he gave me one. Dude, you got to make me a copy of that.
And that's how you transferred it?
Yep. He said, it's going to be kind of hard for me to put this on a digital, way because it's a 45. And he said, honestly, I don't know anybody that has a 45 turntable anymore.
And so how did he transfer it?
He found one of those used record shops. They had a turntable that could speed up to 45. That was just luck, dumb luck. I was talking about, you can look it up on YouTube, and there's a version of those songs on YouTube, but they just sound horrible. It's like a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. I said, well, I can't put this on the record. It sounds terrible, It was like just somebody kept making copies of the songs and put them on YouTube, and it sounded awful. And I said, well, I can't put it on the record. It doesn't sound good enough. So I was very, very lucky and fortuitous that some guy, I'm just mentioning it in an interview, and this guy goes, yeah, I think I got a copy of that thing. So he figured out a way to transfer it and get it to me, and I remastered it and tried to make it sound a little better, and that's the story on that one.
The ones on the lost songs, did you have to bake the reels in order to transfer them?
Oh, yeah. We had to bake the reels. I had about 5, 6, or 7 other songs on those reels that when we got toward the end of the reel and the song would start playing, it just started unraveling. The tape started just sticking to the heads. And I baked them, but I said, well, that's it. And they said, you're only going to get one pass. You better put the tape on, hook everything up to digital, go back to a hard drive. You're only going to get 2 shots at this, maybe. And sure enough, when the tape got toward the end of the reel, I remember I took a picture of it somewhere. There's mold on the tape,
Incredible.
Very lucky that any of them played.
Right.
The guy told me, I'll bake them, but, there's no guarantee, Don, because unfortunately, these things have been sitting in your garage. It's 100 degrees, it's 40 degrees, cold out, it's raining. This tape's sitting there just getting its ass kicked for 35 years in your garage. All the Dokken masters are in a place in Hollywood, a huge building called Iron Mountain, where everything from the Beatles to Zeppelin to everybody has their masters in that building that stays a constant temperature and humidity control. And I said, well, let's just take a shot at it. And I told the label, look, I'll try to save these songs, no guarantee. There was other songs I could have put on here too that did print, but they just sounded awful. The tape was wobbling back and forth. It was phasing. I go, it's over.
One of the songs on there, Hit and Run, that's George Lynch playing on there, right?
No, there's no George on this record at all.
Oh, I thought there was. I thought he was listed on the credits. Either way, that hit and run song I listened.
Maybe that was a song we wrote for Breaking the Chains. Never made it to the record. It might be George. I can't remember right now.
To me, it had almost a Tooth and Nail vibe, like your voice on Tooth and Nail. The vocal track sounds amazing. I just thought that would be great to keep the vocal track, maybe modernize. Yeah, modernize that. It's a fantastic song.
But there's no master. It's a 2-track. So
I got you. Oh, okay. I thought you were getting master tapes.
No. A lot of these songs are 2 tracks. Wasn't much I could do to them. Add some high end, add some low end. Yeah, it might be Lynch playing. I really can't remember.
It's kind of a crazy solo on there, but it somehow has a little bit of his sound.
Yeah, because John Levin did several songs on the album that there was no solos. And then I was still working on the record after surgery. And after my hand got paralyzed, I couldn't play anymore. So John came in and did some solos. But it might be Lynch.
Okay.
I'll have to check it out.
I saw you guys on the Tooth and Nail tour opening for Dio in Dallas, and of course I was a huge Dokken fan. I've also interviewed Tom Werman a few times. We had talked about his experience working on Tooth and Nail.
The poor guy. He got tortured on that recording session.
He said that he had clashed with George.
From day one.
And I'm just wondering, is it true that you and George never were in the studio at the same time?
Never. We couldn't. George would record his guitar tracks in the daytime. I'd be home, and then Michael Wagner took over, and Tom did most of the record until Tom just couldn't take it anymore with George. George was just being a brat. So I said, well, we got to get somebody else to come in here and finish this record that George would get along with. And so I called Michael Wagner to come finish it. And Michael would just call me like 11 o'clock at night and say, okay, George and Jeff and Mick are off to the Rainbow to chase chicks and do blow. And I'd come in the studio, and just Michael and I would just do vocals by ourselves.
Did you not cut any vocals with Tom? Was he already out of there?
No, I don't remember. I think I cut some vocals with him. Yeah, I think so.
Because it said he did pre-production for the album, and he helped select songs and help with some of the arrangements.
Yep, and I think he cut all the basic tracks. Tom did the drums and the guitar and the bass. You know, I don't know what was going on with George then. He just tortured Tom. Tom was a really nice guy, and George just harassed him and tortured him, and it'd be like Tom would ask him to do it again or try something else, and he'd just go, no. You know, so we weren't getting a lot of progress. George just was very stubborn, and it just came to a breaking point. And I said, we'll never get this record done because George is not going to cooperate. So that's the way it was. So we brought in Michael, and they brought in Roy Thomas Baker, the famous producer, to oversee the whole thing.
On Wikipedia, it said that George didn't want. Now, of course, I know you have an incredible friendship with Michael at this point, but it said on there that George didn't want Michael involved in it.
No. And I just basically said, tough shit. He was worried that because Michael was my friend, he had this thing in his head that Michael would do the mixes and my vocals would be super loud. And I said, no, George, Michael's going to mix the album and the vocals are going to be where they're supposed to be. Why would he turn the vocals up too loud? It doesn't make sense. Michael's going to do what's best for the mix. George felt that Michael and I were so tight that he would turn my vocals up too loud. So then we ended up bringing Roy Thomas Baker in to oversee all the final mixes to make sure that Michael wasn't turning my vocals up too loud. It was all kind of ridiculous, but you know, drugs make you crazy, and there was a lot of drugs going on during the Tooth and Nail sessions. You
never did coke, right? Or didn't like it that much?
No, it wasn't my cup of tea. I think I tried it like in 1980, and I was like, what the hell is this? I didn't get it. I tried it, and I was like, I don't get it. Plus, it made my throat dry out, and I was like, no, that's not for me. I was more of a wine guy, champagne, red wine, and Valium to keep my stress down because there was so much bickering going on in the studio. And Roy Thomas Baker did a clever thing where he came in to oversee it. Nobody was allowed in the control room unless you had to wear a badge. He made these little badges, and I can't remember what it said on it. It was something about Baker or something, and he put blenders out in the little waiting room with rum and coconut, and he was making Mai Tais, and we'd all just be drinking Mai Tais, and I think that was Roy's way of just getting us drunk so we'd just mellow out. And it was pretty funny, but nobody was allowed in the studio. George was in there, I was out playing pinball. And then when George left, I would go in and I would sing, and Geoff and I would do background vocals. And it's a miracle the album ever got made.
On tour, are you guys staying separated for that tour?
No, we played for that tour. Yeah, pretty much. I slept on a different floor.
Now it said there were 25 songs written for Tooth and Nail. Does that mean there's like 15 songs out there?
I don't even know where they are. They were just demos, 8 tracks. I don't know what happened to those songs because those were the songs that George and Geoff and Mick wrote, and they didn't make it on the record. And I think that created a lot of animosity because the majority of Tooth and Nail was a lot of my songs that I wrote by myself. And I think they resented that. It wasn't up to me. It was up to the record company. They submitted their songs. I submitted my songs. They picked the songs. I remember George said he'd refuse to play In My Dreams. He just refused. And so he's, okay, I'll play it. And he would play it, but he would play it bad. And the song didn't sound good. And I said, you got to, come on, man, put some fire in it, put some Lynch into it. But he hated the song, so he just wouldn't play it well. So finally I said, if you don't play it, I'm going to play it, because I wrote it. And when I said that, then he went in and did a good job. But I had to literally threaten him that I was going to play the guitar on it, and then he didn't want that. So he finally went in and did a decent performance.
I mean...
like little children in the sandbox,
All right.
fighting over a fire truck.
And, it's incredible because all those Dokken albums, that was the great thing. Tooth and Nail and Under Lock and Key, Back for the Attack, all like perfect albums, and you could listen to the entire thing. I always thought, even as a kid, when you guys broke up, I remember thinking at that time, whatever you guys released after Back for the Attack, that one was going to be the one that did multi-platinum, I felt like you guys were one album away from blowing it up.
And we were. We did Monsters of Rock tour. I think Back to Attack almost went double platinum, and we barely survived the Monsters of Rock tour. There's a lot of infighting, a lot of drugs, a lot of drinking, and I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I mean, I really just couldn't take it anymore. Who leaves their own band they started? The very last show was Colorado, and I said, that's it. I can't take it anymore. And I kept telling George, if you don't stop with the constant harassing of everybody, not just me, the road crew, the sound man, the bus drivers, I don't know what's going on in George's life. So the last show, we did it, and we had a big meeting afterwards with our manager, Cliff Bernstein, and the president of the record company, Bob Krasnow, and we had this big meeting about what to do. And Cliff said, look, you guys are one album away, one hit away of being in a headlining arena act next year, a world tour headlining. We were so close. And I just said, I can't do another record with George. I can't do it. And I told Geoff and Mick, we can go on as Dokken, but we got to get another guitar player because I can't take it anymore. And they said they didn't want to. Nick wanted to go play with George because they grew up together. Geoff decided to go off and do a solo thing and be a lead singer, and he did 2 albums, I think War and Peace and Flesh and Blood, and they didn't do anything. And I just told him at that meeting, I can't do it. And that's why we decided to go to Japan, was our last leg. And so the record company said, well, I guess we'll do a live album, and that's why we did the live album.
Just to backtrack a bit to Tooth and Nail, you wrote a version of Alone Again in 1975?
Yep, when I was like 23 years old, and I did an 8-track of it. Actually, Bobby Blotzer played the drums on it. That was more of an Airborne song, when we're still Airborne, and I wrote it, and we did it on a little 8-track studio. And again, it ended up on a cassette and just thrown in my closet and was forgotten about. And when we did Tooth and Nail, the album was finished, and we gave it to the label. But by the time we did Tooth and Nail, all these bands were putting out ballad videos. Everybody had a ballad. So we didn't have a ballad on the album because George said, I don't want to do any ballads. We're a hard rock band, and he just thought that ballads were bullshit, and he didn't want to do it. So I found this song, Alone Again, probably one of the first recordings I ever did, and I took the cassette, played it for Geoff, and Geoff and I went in the studio and reworked the song to the current version. And that was the last thing we did to go on Tooth and Nail. And that song turned out to be a classic.
It's what really pushed that record into the stratosphere, right?
Yep. As soon as that came out, we went platinum. But it almost didn't make it. That's the same thing. George refused to do it. I wanted to do it. And the record company said, you do it or else, So that was that. Tom Zutaut said, I want this song on the record. And so Geoff and I, we reworked it. And the band still didn't believe in the song. We did 3 videos for that album, Into the Fire, The Hunter, and It's Not Love. And went on tour for a year. And then the tour was over, and I said, you guys are really missing the boat here. We should have put out Alone Again, and everybody's fighting me on it. We don't want to do it. We don't want to do it. We don't want to do it. We ended up out of our own pocket paying some camera crews to come down. We were playing one of our last shows, which was at the Palladium in Hollywood, and that's why it's all live footage. So we just had a bunch of camera guys come in and shoot the show and edit it together, and we put out Alone Again, and it took off.
I'm just curious, when you write, do you typically come up with like a guitar part first and then do a melody? I know you said that sometimes you get ideas of melodies, but a song like Alone Again, how did you come up with that?
Just had a guitar riff, this arpeggiated the intro, and I started scribbling down lyrics, but I really can't dig my memory banks that deep. But most of the songs I wrote, I would just be playing my guitar in my living room and just jamming, and playing riffs, and then something would spark me spiritually, and all of a sudden I'd start hearing a melody, and then I'd stop, and then I'd start writing lyrics, and I'd go on to the next section, and that was my writing technique.
What was it like working with Geoff Workman on Tooth and Nail?
Geoff was great, famous engineer, but the protocol for Geoff Workman was he would stay up all night. I'd be up all night singing, and the next day the band would be in the recording, and Geoff hadn't even left the studio. He'd be in there for like 20 hours, and that's easy to do when you got a big bag of cocaine and a half a gallon of Jack Daniels. How Geoff was so good as an engineer, Workman, I think he passed away about 5 years ago. And Geoff, everybody knows that. He just did a massive amount of drugs and drank a lot of Jack Daniels, so he fit perfect with the other three guys, and that's the way it was. But he was a great engineer, and he was patient. Geoff was very patient. He'd let the arguments and the fights and the bickering, it just went over his head. He'd just be drinking a Jack and Coke and doing a couple lines of blow, and that's what he did. And then, unfortunately, doing that for decades, caught up with him, and he passed away. And he was Roy Thomas Baker's guy.
Right.
Baker was doing like Zeppelin and all the other bands. Roy Thomas Baker was the engineer.
And I think Geoff had done 3 back-to-back albums with Tom Werman. And maybe that's why they had their issues, because they had done Shout at the Devil. And then I think right before your record, they're doing Twisted Sister, Stay Hungry.
Correct.
Now, when I talked to Tom, he said that Geoff was incredibly divisive and would fuck him over. He talked about how Geoff would record him in the studio and then edit things together and play it for the band later.
Oh, he talked about that? Yeah, they'd be recording Tom talking about this and that and girls and sex and whatever, and then they'd sit up all night and edit it to make it sound like he was a pervert. They would edit Tom talking and make it out of context, and they thought that was really funny, and I didn't think it was funny at all. Stupid, childish things like that. And I'd say, guys, you guys sat up all night for 6 hours editing Werman talking about various stuff. They'd kind of prompt him, and you're wasting all this valuable recording time fucking around doing things like that and wasting thousands of dollars. It was frustrating for Tom. He left the project, and I don't blame him.
Any idea what that album ended up costing by the end of it?
Tooth and Nail?
Yeah.
No, probably $250,000.
Looked like you guys were on the verge of losing your deal after breaking the chains.
They wanted to drop us. Look, we did an arena tour. They gave it their best shot. We toured arenas with Bloister Cult and Y&T. We had our shot, and the song Breaking the Chains was on every radio station. And what they called it back in the day was a passive hit. Everybody would say, oh, I love that song, but they didn't buy the record. So we get off the road after 8 months, busting our ass, and we come home, the record company goes, well, guys, you sold 100,000. And that's not really worth all the money we invested in you to keep you on the label. And I basically just begged and pleaded to give us one more shot. I went and had a meeting with Tom Zutot and everybody and said, let us just at least write some demos. And if you don't like them, you can drop us. If you like them, we'll make a record. So I talked to the boys, and I said, guys, this is our last chance. If you guys don't pull together, we don't pull together as a band, we're all going to be back playing clubs singing Little Red Corvette. So the band pulled together. The 3 of them went and did their thing, got a big ounce of cocaine, and they did what they did. And I wrote my songs in my apartment. And between all my stuff, and Geoff was kind of like the referee. Geoff would work with George and Mick. On the way home, he'd stop by my house, and he'd work with me on my songs. And he was kind of like the referee between my songwriting and their songwriting. And that's what he brought to the table, that he kind of would ride the fence between those guys and me.
Were you wanting to actually be more aggressive with your voice on Tooth and Nail? Was that like a conscious decision?
No.
It was just kind of how the songs were turning out?
Yep. It's just the way the songs were written, and I had to sing appropriately.
Did Geoff have like a vocal chain, or did you have a favorite vocal chain, or did you just kind of rely on whatever the engineer wanted?
I don't understand what a vocal chain means.
Oh, vocal chain being like, did you have a favorite mic and a favorite preamp, or?
Yeah, I used a really strange mic that most singers don't use, and it's called a Schoeps condenser mic. It's a very skinny-looking thing, like a cigar. It's actually designed for overheads on drums, like a cymbal mic. And for some reason, we went through like 5 mics to find the right sound. And Michael said, for some reason, that mic really brings out your voice. It sounds organic. So I sang most of the album on a Schoeps, and then on the heavy songs, I used a Neumann 87. So it's mostly Neumann 87, which everybody used back then. A lot of singers liked the C47, but it was too dark for me, and it was too muddy, and it just didn't fit my voice. So I used a Neumann 87 and the Schoeps condenser, and they ran me through an API, old API analog lunchbox, which, that company got out of business. And I ended up years later, Eddie Van Halen had a whole console of API, and I ended up buying 2 channels of compressors and 2 channels of mic pre's from him and put it in a thing we call a lunchbox. Still got it. Every album I've done since 90, I've always sang on the same mic and the same mic pre's and the same EQ. And that's API. I use it. I had a recording studio for 10 years. And I built my own studio when we got rich and famous, I guess you could call it. And I built my own recording studio. And I had a really beautiful studio in Redondo Beach. But no matter what we did, I always used that API and the same mic. And I've still got it. I still use it at every record since then. Hell to Pay, Lightning Strikes, Broken Bones. I use my API. It's analog. It's not digital. So it worked for me. And unfortunately, the microphone I had, the Schoeps, were very rare. Old German mics built in the 40s or 50s. And my studio got broken into, and they stole all my microphones, and that was one of them. And that was a real bummer. They stole all my mics. And so that's that. So now I sing on a Neumann 67, which is a remake of the 87, but it's solid state. Sounds okay. Not quite the same. Everything's Pro Tools now. I have a recording studio here at my house. I can make a whole record in my house, and I don't have to worry about it. I don't have any neighbors. On 13 acres, no one can hear you.
Right.
So I have a full-blown studio, and I record here, and it's all Pro Tools, except for my analog outboard gear that I've kept from my own studio. And that's the way it's always been, and it probably always will be.
Anything stand out from the Dio tour that you did for Tooth and Nail?
I just remember it was fun. We were getting famous, and we were enjoying it, and there was a ton of girls, and it was sold out every night, and all I remember was just a great tour. It was exciting. It was in the winter. I mean, some of it was in the winter. I remember they're getting off the tour bus and up to my knees in snow.
Dokken always seemed to have a winter vibe to him.
Yep, we were always on tour in the winter, which wreaked havoc on my voice.
Was that intentional, or was that just because of the timing of things?
Just timing. They want the record out for the holidays. They put it out for 8 weeks. We get it on the radio. That's November, December. And now we're ready to go on tour and back it up, and it's snowing like hell.
How's Mick doing in retirement?
Honestly, I remember the day he quit that I want to retire. We were at the airport, and we knew he was struggling. His knees hurt, his arms hurt, his elbows hurt, his fingers hurt. And I remember he pulled me aside. We only had 3 shows to go. We had a couple of days off, and we were standing outside in front of the airport, and he says, "Look, man, I can't do this anymore." He said, "I just can't." And I said, "You're not happy?" And he goes, "No, I just can't physically do it. I'm done. I've been playing drums for 50 years since I was 10 years old, and my body's worn out. My back hurts, and there's little signs, like when we get off the airplane, we'd be taking our carry-ons and walking the baggage, and Mick would be way behind us, walking real slow and limping, and his hips hurt and his legs hurt. And he just wore himself out like a football player. You play football and you get beat up long enough, you can't play football anymore. And Mick had the hardest job in the whole band. I'd like to see anybody bash those drums for 50 years and not get injured. And same as Neil Peart and Rush. He retired because of all his physical problems. Because you play drums, it kicks your ass. Just flying would hurt Mick's back and his hips, just sitting in the plane. He'd be in a lot of pain. A couple of times I used to have to help him up out of his seat because he's just hurting. The only drummer I know that's been around forever since he played Woodstock in Black Oak, Arkansas, is Tommy Aldridge. When I did the Scorpions Whitesnake tour, I was shocked that I'd hear somebody playing drums backstage in the dressing rooms. And Tommy actually would set up a drum set and warm up before the show on the drums. I was blown away by that. Tommy has taken care of himself. a skinny guy, you know. He would literally put a drum set in the dressing room with Whitesnake. He would warm up, basically play the show twice, and he'd be playing drums, warming up for an hour for the show. And I was very impressed by that.
So what is Mick doing nowadays?
Honestly, I have not spoken to him since the day he left the band. We were friends for 40 years. He went off social media. He shut all his social media down, his website. I heard a week after he got home, he put his drums up for sale. And I hear that he's just living in Arizona, riding his Harley and kicking back and playing PlayStation, you know. But he kind of, for some reason, broke off contact with everybody. I know he did a video with Lynch and Pilsen and Robert Mason called The End Machine, and he's playing drums on that in the video. But I did notice in the video of The End Machine, I know Mick pretty well, and I can see Mick in the shot, and he's playing a lot softer than he used to. But I have not spoken to Mick since the day he left the group, which was kind of sad, because I always...
God, no kidding.
We grew up together.
I know he went with Lynch for that period, but then he came back and has been with you, I think, ever since, right?
15 years, yeah. Right. He'd come stay at my house, and he lived with me, and I remember I sold my house in Manhattan Beach, and Mick and I went and rented one of those Oakwood Gardens apartments for a few months. We were living together until we went on the road, and so, you know, Mick and I had a long friendship. Why he didn't want to stay incommunicado with anybody, I can't answer. You'd have to ask Mick. Mick sees it as his past, and he just wants to let it go.
Now, you and George seem to be on the mend. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, we're too old to argue.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Is it just kind of age and wisdom that...
Not only now, nobody does drugs anymore. Nobody drinks, you know. I mean, Pilsen was a heavy drinker, you know, back in the 80s. He started going to AA, 27 years ago. And he's been clean forever. He's been in Foreigner for over 20 years. And so, you know, everybody found their way. You either get clean or die.
Any chance of a Dokken Lynch album?
No. They approached me a while back to make another Dokken record. And I said, look, I have Dokken. I've got John Levin, who's been in the band 22 years. I got Chris and BJ. I have my lineup. We all get along. We're great friends. No bickering, no hassle. It's easy breezy. I said, I'm at peace with this band, and I'm going to stay that way.
Yeah, I just thought you know, how Robert Plant and Jimmy Page went off. Both of you guys have huge names. I mean, just to do a separate thing where it's Dokken Lynch.
Well, we did some songs. We did some shows with George.
Well, of course, but an album, though, maybe, or something. Like they recorded an album and then toured it.
We did the live album 5 years ago, Reunion, and then we did one brand new song. You know,
right.
It's Just Another Day. We did that video, Original Members. And then we all went on our own separate ways. George has many projects going on. Jeff's got Foreigner, and Jeff produces other bands, and Jeff's got his studio, and Jeff lives and breathes recording. So, and he's got a family and kids, and, you know, and George now is a grandfather. So the world changes. We were all single in the 80s. Now everybody's got kids. My kids are grown. The world changed, you know, and your life changes, and your priorities change. You don't have time to bicker with your band members. You just get together and make music and go on the road and make it work.
How have you been adapting to this new world that we're living in?
With the apocalypse, between my hand being paralyzed and COVID and social unrest and mass demonstrations, and people looting, and the thugs and the hoods and the gangbangers smashing up windows and breaking into liquor stores, which has nothing to do with George Floyd. It's just an excuse for them to go and be hoods. And it pisses me off when I see people smashing Nordstroms and looting. What does this have to do with George Floyd? It's just a bunch of losers and gangbangers and thugs for an excuse because they know that the police are stretched too thin and they just want to go and be thieves. I don't live my life like that. I don't know what's going on in the world, but it's like anarchy.
So have you booked any shows for next year?
Yeah, but they're all TBC. I got 2 shows in Texas, 2 shows in October. I told my agent no more shows until all this shit gets sorted out. And then there's still shows up on my website that we're playing, but we're not playing. We had a whole run of California. California shut down, and it's not going to open back up. It's not going to happen until the COVID stats go down. So all those shows are canceled. There's no bands touring right now. 0. 1 show here, 1 show there, but there's no tours going out. Guns N' Roses stadium tour, Motley Crue stadium tour, all canceled. 2021 should be a pretty busy year for rock and roll.
Oh my God, everybody will be coming out at the same time.
Yeah, all up to the COVID.
Any other news on the Dokken front?
We're just working on a new studio album. We're about half finished. We've been working over the internet, like Zoom and Skype, and writing together over the internet. Everybody throws their ideas together, and we're just trying to write a new record. And it'll be ready for next year's touring season. The Lost Songs was kind of like a Band-Aid album to get us through until the new studio album. We've already got 7 songs done.
How are they sounding?
I'm happy. We haven't mixed them yet, but the songs are great. I haven't finished all the lyrics because it's really hard since I can't hold a pen. I like to write my lyrics down with a pen, but I can't hold a pen. So I bought a dictation program, and I just talk the lyrics into my computer and, look at them and do scratch vocals, and, we'll just have to see what happens. Right now, I'm just concentrating on working on getting healthy.
Did you and George ever throw down back in the day?
Unfortunately, yes, a few times.
Who got the best?
Not going to answer that.